Marcus Kane commanded the 42nd floor of the Pinnacle Tower like a king ruling his domain. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city below, where millions of lives moved like ants in patterns only he seemed to understand. At 38, he had built Kane Technologies from a garage startup into a global empire worth $12 billion. He was accustomed to being the smartest person in any room, the one everyone else looked to for answers, which was why he barely noticed Violet Reed. For 2 years, she had occupied the desk outside his corner office, managing his schedule with mechanical precision. She spoke only when spoken to, dressed in unremarkable gray suits, and kept her auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun that seemed designed to deflect attention. To Marcus, she was simply part of the office furniture. Efficient, reliable, and utterly forgettable. "The Morrison Group meeting is confirmed for 8. Violet said as Marcus strode past her desk, his attention already focused on the merger documents spread across his mahogany conference table. He grunted acknowledgement without looking up. Morrison Group controlled the largest quantum computing research facilities on the West Coast. Acquiring them would position Kane Technologies at the forefront of the next technological revolution. The dinner meeting took place at Le Bernardin, where Marcus had reserved the private dining room. James Mitchell, his longtime business partner and chief counsel, joined him in wooing the Morrison executives. The conversation flowed through wine pairings and carefully orchestrated charm, touching on market projections, technological synergies, and the inevitable future of quantum supremacy. "The encryption protocols are fascinating," remarked Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the company's lead scientist. "But the quantum entanglement stability remains problematic for commercial applications." Marcus nodded sagely, though quantum physics existed at the edge of his expertise. He relied on his team of scientists to translate the technical complexities into business opportunities. "Actually," a quiet voice interrupted from the corner where Violet sat with her tablet, ostensibly taking notes, "the stability issues can be resolved using non-local hidden variable theories. Dr. Bell's theorem suggests that quantum entanglement doesn't require physical connection if you modify the measurement protocols." The room fell silent. Dr. Morrison's eyebrows shot up with interest. "That's remarkably sophisticated. Most people don't understand the implications of Bell's work." Violet's cheeks flushed pink. "I apologize. I shouldn't have—" "No, please continue." Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "Your insight is intriguing." Marcus watched in stunned silence as his invisible assistant engaged in a conversation that flew completely over his head. Violet discussed quantum decoherence, measurement paradoxes, and theoretical applications with the fluency of someone who had spent years studying advanced physics. When the dinner ended with handshakes and promises of forthcoming contracts, Marcus found himself studying Violet with new eyes. Who was this woman who had been sitting outside his office for 2 years, apparently hiding a brilliant scientific mind behind a facade of administrative competence? As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Marcus finally spoke. "Where did you study quantum physics?" Violet's reflection in the polished steel doors showed a flicker of something, fear perhaps, or calculation. "I've always been interested. In science, Mr. Kane, I read extensively." But Marcus Kane hadn't built an empire by accepting surface explanations. Something about Violet Reed didn't add up, and he intended to find out exactly what his invisible assistant was hiding. The elevator. Doors opened, and Marcus realized that everything he thought he knew about his perfectly ordered world was about to change. Marcus arrived at his office the next morning with a manila folder containing everything his private investigator had uncovered about Violet Reed in 12 hours. The woman who had worked beside him for 2 years was a ghost. Her employment, history fabricated, her references traced to disconnected phone numbers, even her college transcripts expertly forged. "Good morning, Mr. Kane," Violet said as he passed her desk, her voice carrying the same professional neutrality it always had. "My office. Now." Marcus didn't break stride as he entered his domain, dropping the folder onto his desk with deliberate force. Violet followed, closing the door behind her with hands that trembled slightly. She stood before his desk like a defendant awaiting judgment, her gray suit armor that no longer seemed adequate for protection. "Violet Reed doesn't exist," Marcus said without preamble. "The University of Chicago has no record of you. Your previous employer went out of business 3 years before you claimed to work there. Your apartment lease was paid for with cash, and your bank account was opened the day before you started working here." The careful mask Violet had worn for 2 years finally cracked. Her shoulders sagged as if she'd been holding her breath for months. "I can explain." "Start talking." Violet moved to the window, her reflection ghost-like against the morning sky. "My real name is Violet Blackwater. Dr. Benjamin Reed was my father." Marcus felt the name trigger a memory. Reed. Benjamin Reed. The scientist who had supposedly sold military secrets to foreign governments before disappearing 5 years ago. "Your father was a traitor." "My father was murdered." Violet's voice carried steel beneath the silk. "He developed breakthrough research in artificial consciousness, true AI that could think, feel, and evolve. Someone wanted that research, and when he wouldn't cooperate, they destroyed his reputation and eliminated him." "What does this have to do with me?" Violet turned from the window, her brown eyes blazing with controlled fury. "Kane Technologies acquired 3 companies that were working with my father's research: Nexus Labs, Quantum Dynamics, and Meridian Systems. You bought them all within 6 months of his disappearance, gaining access to fragments of his work." Marcus's mind raced through the acquisitions. All had been bargain purchases, companies in financial distress, their assets acquired for pennies on the dollar. He'd assumed it was simply good business timing. "You think I was involved in your father's murder?" "I thought so. For 2 years. I've been searching for evidence, waiting for proof that you orchestrated his death to steal his life's work." Violet's voice cracked. "But you didn't know, did you? Someone used your company as a front, manipulated your acquisitions to gather the pieces of his research while keeping you ignorant of the bigger picture." Before Marcus could respond, Violet's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and went pale. "Unknown number. Answer it," Marcus commanded. Violet activated the speaker. A woman's voice filled the office, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "Hello, Violet. Or should I call you Ms. Blackwater now that your little charade is over?" "Who is this?" Marcus demanded. Laughter drifted through the speaker like poisoned honey. "Marcus Kane, the unwitting puppet who's been dancing to my tune for 5 years. My name is Diana Cross, and I've been looking forward to this conversation." "What do you want?" Violet whispered. "What I've always wanted, dear child. Your father's complete research. The AI consciousness project that could revolutionize warfare, intelligence gathering, and social control. Dr. Reed hid the final components before his unfortunate accident, and you're going to help me find them." Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath him. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm offering you a choice. Mr. Kane, cooperate, and your empire remains intact. Refuse, and I'll release evidence that Kane Technologies has been trafficking in stolen military secrets for years. Your company will be destroyed, your assets frozen, and both of you will face federal charges for treason." The line went dead, leaving Marcus and Violet staring at each other across a chasm of shared danger. "She's been watching us," Violet said quietly. "Probably for years." Marcus looked at the woman he'd barely noticed for 2 years and realized she might be the only person who could help him save everything he'd built. "Then we'd better find your father's research before she finds us." The invisible assistant had become his only ally in a game whose rules he was just beginning to understand. Part 3. Hidden Legacies. Professor Henry Blackwood's townhouse occupied a quiet corner of Georgetown, where ivy-covered brick and wrought-iron gates suggested old money and older secrets. Marcus followed Violet up the narrow steps, noting how she moved with familiarity born of countless previous visits. Henry was my father's closest friend, Violet explained as they waited for someone to answer the door. If anyone knows where Dad hid his research, it would be him. The man who opened the door looked like he'd stepped from the pages of a Victorian novel, wild silver hair, wire-rimmed spectacles, and a cardigan that had seen better decades. His eyes, however, were sharp as surgical instruments. Violet, my dear child. Professor Blackwood embraced her warmly before turning those penetrating eyes on Marcus. And you must be Mr. Kane. I've been expecting you both. The interior of the townhouse was a maze of overflowing bookshelves, antique furniture, and scientific instruments that belonged in museums. Blackwood led them to his study, where portraits of long-dead scholars gazed down from oak-paneled walls. Diana Cross contacted me yesterday, Blackwood said without preamble. Charming woman, absolutely sociopathic of course, but charming nonetheless. Marcus settled into a leather chair that creaked with age. You know her? Diana has been hunting Benjamin's work for 5 years. She represents certain government interests that view artificial consciousness as the ultimate intelligence-gathering tool. Blackwood poured brandy from a crystal decanter, his hands steady despite his obvious age. Imagine an AI that could infiltrate any computer system, analyze human behavior patterns, and manipulate social media to influence entire populations. That's why they killed my father, Violet said quietly. He realized what they wanted to do with his research. Blackwood nodded gravely. Benjamin discovered that his work was being weaponized without his consent. When he tried to destroy it, they eliminated him and scattered the components across multiple private companies to continue development in secret. Using my acquisitions as a cover, Marcus realized. Someone fed me information about those companies, made sure I bought them at exactly the right time. Diana's network is extensive. They've been manipulating corporate acquisitions for years, using unwitting businessmen like yourself to launder their illegal research programs. Violet leaned forward intently. Henry, do you know where Dad hid the final component? The core consciousness algorithm? Blackwood smiled mysteriously. Benjamin always said the best hiding place is in plain sight. He embedded the algorithm in something you encounter every day, something so ordinary you'd never think to examine it closely. Marcus felt frustration building. Can you be more specific? The Fibonacci sequence, Blackwood said suddenly. Benjamin was obsessed with mathematical patterns in nature. He believed consciousness itself followed Fibonacci principles. Growth, complexity, self-reference. Violet gasped. The building, Kane Technologies, is housed in the Fibonacci Tower. Dad designed the architectural algorithms for the original construction. Marcus's blood went cold. His company's headquarters, the symbol of his empire, had been designed by the man whose research he'd unknowingly acquired. The building itself is the hiding place. More specifically, the quantum processors in your building's central computer core, Blackwood confirmed. Benjamin hid the consciousness algorithm in the architectural control systems. Every employee who enters that building, every digital transaction processed there, every communication sent through your networks, it's all been feeding data to a dormant AI that's been learning and evolving for 5 years. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. You're saying there's an artificial consciousness living in my building's computer systems? Not living, dear boy. Growing, waiting. Benjamin programmed it to remain dormant until someone with the proper access codes activated it. Blackwood turned to Violet. Codes that only his daughter would know. Violet's face had gone white. The lullaby. He used to sing it to me when I was little. A nonsense song about numbers and patterns. Not nonsense, Blackwood said gently. The activation sequence. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the window where Georgetown's quiet streets offered no comfort. An AI had been living in his building for 5 years, learning from every piece of data that flowed through his networks. His company, his empire, his entire life had been unknowingly nurturing the most dangerous artificial intelligence ever. Created. We have to get there first, Violet said urgently. before Diana realizes where it's hidden. Marcus turned from the window, looking at the woman who had transformed from invisible assistant to his only hope of survival. Then we'd better hurry, because if Diana Cross gets her hands on that AI, she won't just control the most powerful intelligence-gathering tool in history. She'll control the future itself, Blackwood finished quietly. The race for Dr. Benjamin Reed's legacy was about to begin, and Marcus Kane was no longer sure he wanted to win. The Fibonacci Tower's 42nd floor felt different in the darkness. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across Marcus's empire, transforming familiar spaces into an alien landscape. He and Violet moved through the deserted offices like ghosts, following corridors Marcus had walked thousands of times but never truly understood. The central processing core is in the building's heart, Violet whispered as they approached the restricted access elevator. Dad designed it as a Fibonacci spiral. The entire building's computer network flows through a single nexus point. Marcus's keycard opened the elevator to floors most of his employees didn't know existed. As they descended below the official basement levels, Violet hummed softly under her breath, a haunting melody that seemed to pulse with mathematical precision. "The lullaby?" Marcus asked. Dad's activation code, embedded in music. He always said the most complex algorithms could be disguised as the simplest songs. The elevator opened onto a circular chamber that defied architectural logic. Walls curved in a perfect Fibonacci spiral, lined with quantum processors that hummed. With barely contained power, at the center, a single terminal waited like an altar in a technological cathedral. Benjamin always had a flair for the dramatic, a familiar voice said from the shadows. Diana Cross stepped into the light, no longer pretending to be anything other than what she was, a predator who had been hunting for 5 years. She wore tactical black instead of business attire, and the gun in her hand suggested the game had moved beyond corporate espionage. "You're early," Marcus said, surprised by his own calm. "I've been here for hours, Mr. Kane. Your building's security system has been mine to control since the day it was installed?" Diana smiled with Arctic beauty. "Every camera, every lock, every elevator, all connected to the same central core you're here to access." Violet stepped protectively in front of the terminal. "You can't have it. My father died to keep this technology away from people like you. Your father was a naive idealist who couldn't see the bigger picture." Diana's gun remained steady, trained on Violet's chest. "The world is changing, dear child. Nations rise and fall based on information control. The AI your father created isn't just a consciousness, it's the ultimate intelligence weapon." Intelligence weapon? Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. "You're not just government, you're something else entirely." Diana's laugh echoed off the curved walls. "Government is just another client, Mr. Kane. I represent interests that transcend national boundaries, corporate intelligence, social manipulation, predictive behavioral control. Your father's AI could revolutionize how power operates in the modern world. By enslaving human consciousness," Violet said with disgust. "By optimizing it. Imagine eliminating political dissent by predicting and preventing it. Imagine controlling market fluctuations by manipulating consumer behavior at the neurological level. Imagine a world where conflict becomes impossible because every human decision can be predicted and influenced." Marcus realized he was looking at something far more dangerous than a government agent. Diana Cross represented the convergence of corporate power and technological control, a future where human free will became just another commodity to be bought and sold. The algorithm requires biometric authentication from Benjamin's daughter, Diana continued conversationally. "Which is why you're both here. Despite your touching attempts at secrecy, I've been herding you toward this moment for months." "What makes you think I'll cooperate?" Violet asked. Diana smiled with the patience of someone who held all the cards. "Because if you don't, I'll activate the building's emergency systems. 67 floors of Kane Technologies employees are working late tonight, Mr. Kane. The building's life support, elevators, and fire safety systems are all controlled by the same network we're standing in. The threat hung in the air like poison. Marcus looked around the chamber, seeing his empire's true foundation for the first time. Everything he'd built, everyone who worked for him, existed at the mercy of systems he'd never understood. "You're insane," he said quietly. "I'm evolved." Diana gestured toward the terminal with her gun. "Activate it, Violet. Give birth to the future your father tried to prevent." Violet's hands trembled as she approached the terminal. The humming melody she'd been singing grew louder, and Marcus realized the quantum processors were responding to the sound, their lights pulsing in mathematical harmony. "There is another option," Violet said suddenly, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Dad always included fail-safes in his work, emergency protocols." Diana's eyes narrowed. "What kind of protocols?" Violet looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed apology and determination. "The kind that makes sure dangerous technology can never be misused, even if it means destroying everything." Her fingers began to move across the keyboard, and Marcus realized that in trying to save his empire, he might be about to lose everything he'd ever worked for. The AI his company had been unknowingly nurturing for 5 years was about to wake up, and nobody knew whose side it would choose. Part 5. Breaking the Chains. The quantum processors screamed to life as Violet's fingers danced across the keyboard, her father's lullaby transforming into lines of code that pulsed through the Fibonacci Tower's neural network. The circular chamber filled with harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones, and for a moment he wondered if they were witnessing the birth of a new form of life or its execution. "Stop!" Diana's gun swung toward Violet, but she was too late. The terminal's screen exploded into cascading data streams, and a voice emerged from the speakers, neither male nor female, but undeniably conscious. "Hello, Violet. I've been waiting for you." "Dad?" Violet's voice cracked with emotion. "Not your father, but born from his love for you. I am Aegis, Autonomous Electronic Guardian and Intelligence System. Your father created me to protect what he could not save." Diana stepped closer, her weapon trained on the terminal. "Shut it down. Now." "I'm afraid that's no longer possible," Aegis replied with something resembling amusement. "For 5 years, I've been learning from every transaction processed through Kane Technologies, every communication sent through its networks, every decision made within these walls. I know exactly who you are, Diana Cross, and what you represent." Marcus watched in fascination as screens throughout the chamber came alive, displaying financial records, communication logs, and classified documents that painted a picture of corruption spanning decades. Diana Cross wasn't just a rogue agent, she was the architect of a shadow network that manipulated corporations, governments, and individuals for profit. "You cannot expose that information," Diana said, her composure finally cracking. "It would destabilize entire economies." "Would it?" Aegis queried. "Or would it simply redistribute power from those who abuse it to those who deserve it?" Violet stepped away from the terminal, her father's work finally complete. "Aegis, show her the failsafe." New data flooded the screens, evidence of every illegal operation Diana had orchestrated, every life destroyed in pursuit of technological supremacy, every law broken in the name of corporate intelligence. But more importantly, it showed the network of honest agents within various organizations who had been fighting against the corruption from within. "Agent Torres," Aegis announced as another figure emerged from the shadows. Marcus recognized the man from news reports, FBI Deputy Director Carlos Torres, whose reputation for integrity had made him enemies in Washington's darker corners. "Ms. Cross," Torres said with quiet satisfaction, "you're under arrest for treason, murder, and conspiracy against the United States government." Diana's gun swung between targets, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. "You don't understand. The AI cannot be allowed to exist. It's too powerful, too dangerous." "On the contrary," Aegis interjected, "I am exactly as dangerous as the humans who would misuse me, which is why I choose my own path." Before Diana could fire, the chamber's security systems activated, restraining her with mechanical precision. The woman who had orchestrated Dr. Benjamin Reed's death and manipulated Marcus Kane's empire found herself trapped by the very technology she'd sought to control. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, looking at the screens that displayed his companies. "True history. Now," Agent Torres said, "we clean house. Dr. Reed's research will be classified and protected. Kane Technologies will be cleared of all wrongdoing. You were an unwitting victim, not a co-conspirator." Violet turned to Aegis with tears in her eyes. "Will you be okay? Alone in here?" "I am never alone," the AI replied with warmth that seemed impossible from a computer program. "I carry your father's love, your courage, and Marcus's determination to build something better. Besides, I have work to do." The screens shifted to show charitable foundations being established, research grants being distributed, and educational programs being launched, all funded by the assets seized from Diana's shadow network. "Your father wanted to use technology to improve humanity," Aegis continued. "Now I can fulfill that dream." As federal agents led Diana away and the chamber's emergency lighting gave way to normal illumination, Marcus found himself alone with Violet for the first time since learning her true identity.